you are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
Hey, would you be interested if I told you that I have a 4-step framework to become super successful and incredibly good looking? If so, grab a pen and take some notes, because here we go. Step 1, define what success looks like to you in your life, and the most important aspects that you say are a priority. Not someone else's definition, but your own definition. From that, create a vision that breaks it down into daily action steps. Step 2, take action. Turn those steps into habits, track them, and know that there'll be challenges along your journey. Step 3, surround yourself with like-minded people that will hold you accountable to what you said you wanted to do, and know that they'll also be there to lift you up when it gets hard. Step 4, live in those newly created habits to form you into the type of person that you want to become through calendar level type change. We call it getting real at TKM. We reflect, we execute, we account, and we live. And we've discovered that you can accomplish anything with that framework. And that's exactly what the Kinetic Man is all about. We take uncommon action to live with no regrets and say yes to our best life. Now, most of this gets done inside our high-level mastermind that meets every week. But we've had great feedback, and we decided to start a new program called TKM Reflections, guiding men to take uncommon action. We're starting it in March, and we're going to meet once a month to guide you through redefining success in 9 critical aspects of your life, which we call the Kinetic Life Circle. You'll be asked some really hard questions. You'll be surrounded by like-minded warriors, and you'll walk away with a new definition of success and an action plan to live a life without regret. And here's what you get. You'll get video recordings to build your foundation. You'll come away with a new identity, core values, and a purpose. You'll have monthly live and recorded 1-hour video calls with the TKM staff. You'll get a downloadable copy of the Kinetic Life Plan, which is 50 plus pages of incredible content. And you'll get a community of men that you'll know fully and will call brother. And we're adding on some bonuses that normally only the mastermind members get. You'll get access to 4 monthly level up videos from our podcast guests. You'll get access to the quarterly investor pitch day, which is incredible. And you'll get access to our annual private retreat here in Colorado that's only for members. So you might be asking, who's this for? And I'll honestly say that it's for every man that's ready to step it up and live a life without regret. It's for the man who wants to redefine success and say yes to his best life. So now is the opportunity. Jump on this. Go to thekineticman.com/sign up. Again, thekineticman.com/sign up. Go take uncommon action. We'll see you there. All right. I'm going to start this conversation with a leadership question, Josh. You ready for this?
Hit me.
All right. So you're on spring break. You're doing a road trip with your family. You're taking your son to the bathroom at a local truck stop. And the bathroom's gross. Like toilet paper on the floor. Like the sink is nasty. Like stuff everywhere. Your son goes to the bathroom. And then like he goes like number 2, he comes out and like, he's like, Dad, do I have to wash my hands? Like the bathroom's disgusting. Like no toilet, no like towels readily available. Like what do you do?
Well, and before you go, Josh, I just want to add for my own understanding so that I have full context before you give us some leadership gems. Is the bathroom grosser than poo on your fingers?
You asked
I don't
me?
know. I mean,
No, I'm
that's
asking Stu, just
that's
for
the
additional
question.
context.
That's the question.
Okay.
What's
All right.
grosser?
Take it away, Josh. Take it away.
What do you do?
I think Dave is kind of answering the question for us, because it sounds like if the bathroom is good enough to use, then it's certainly good enough to wash your hands. I would assume that. But man, I gotta say, best beginning question to a podcast I've ever been a part of. But yeah, to answer your question, I would say, yeah, he's got to wash his hands. I mean,
Got to wash his hands. Okay.
That's what we
Question
do
number
here,
2.
man. That's what we do here.
Question
Good
number
questions.
2. If your business partner goes to the restroom in our office space prior to you going into the restroom, and you walk in and there's no paper towels, and the door handle is completely wet, and then you go in afterwards.
No.
Do you wash your hands afterwards and then just have wet hands and continue to add on to the grossness of wet door handle, or
Great
do you
question.
not wash your hands?
Great
I think
question.
any good business partner sets their business partner up for success. He clearly washed the door handle for you on his way out after doing his own business.
Josh, here's the deal, man. I think this is going to be a really good podcast. I appreciate you already because you know like bro code, man. Like you understand that. Would you see? I would be a little bit more grossed out if I touched the doorknob and I'm like, oh, it's completely dry and there's no paper towels. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
kind of weird. That's kind
Yeah.
of weird. I don't
What if you
know.
just wash your hands and like, I mean,
Hey,
how'd
man,
you dry your hands? How'd you dry your hands?
I actually didn't. That
Use your
wasn't
pants?
water. That wasn't water on the
Oh,
doorknob. So I just want to clarify that and
cool.
giddy up. But as interesting as this line of questioning is, and as much application that it has to leadership, which I greatly appreciate. I
Yeah.
greatly appreciate. We did not actually bring you onto the podcast to talk about potty rules and leadership within the toilet. Although critical and although something that I think more people need to talk about, particularly those that don't wash their hands because there are
Mhm.
those, and I think those people are gross. If you're a listener and you don't wash your hands, I'm not judging you, but I do think you're gross. Just throwing that out there, and maybe you should check that. But Josh, super excited to have you on the show. Super cool website and book. Appreciate you sending it. Well, you sent it to Stu, which I find to be. I mean, that was a that's fine. We'll get
Dave, I
past
owe
that.
you one. I owe you one. I apologize.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's all good. But I do also want to acknowledge for those that don't watch our show, but just listen to it. Uh, amazing beard, amazing beard, and from
Thank
there
you.
I'll let you take over.
Thank you, man.
Tell us about yourself.
I'm not sure where to go. Okay, so well, thank you for that, David. I think because you highlighted the beard, which I appreciate. It's a good segue into the bearded leader. Which is kind of this moniker that I adopted a couple years ago. I was still working at a corporate job as a corporate coach and a corporate trainer. Doing my best to make an impact and make a difference in the lives of the attendees that I had the pleasure of serving in a training space, as well as the team members that we worked with in a coaching space on a regular basis. And I feel like God kind of put it on my heart a couple years ago to reach more people and build more leaders. And that's my mission statement, is to reach people and build leaders. And so, in order to do that, I thought, you know what? People always comment on my beard, and I have this affinity for leadership. What if I just say it's the bearded leaders? So that's when the beardedleader.com was created, and fast forward about a year later, and that's when I continue to follow what I believe to be God's calling for my life, and officially jumped into this terrifying world of entrepreneurship. And it's been amazing. I jokingly say a terrifying world, but as you and a lot of your listeners know, if you're in the world of entrepreneurship, you are likely doing it scared on a daily basis. But as believers, we also know that the similarity between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet. And so while I'm doing it scared at times, I also am exercising my faith in the process. And so, I was in corporate world and jumped into entrepreneurship about a year ago as a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. And here we are today on the Kinetic Man podcast.
I love that, man. I love how you tie your faith journey into your entrepreneur journey. Stu and I are very passionate about our businesses being reflective of our faith, and like the Storehouse 310 reference, the TCAM, the things that we do are very much driven towards exercising that faith in the business being an avenue. Not only, I think a lot of us see the business as an avenue to express it, but to your point, man, and this is something literally in the shower this morning. I was just thanking God, and I was like, I just want to every day dedicate this to you, to give it, not dedicate, but to put it into your hands, because in my hands, excuse me, in my hands, it won't grow. In my
Yes.
hands, there's fear. In my hands, I have no, I have no promise for a future. And
Mhm.
so, it's interesting that you say that, because this morning it was something that I was like, man, I have to constantly, not only should a business be an expression of faith, but the business, for me at least, is an exercise in faith. Do I
Yes.
have faith that God will provide, that He will make this thing what it is that it should be? So I really appreciate you highlighting that. I did not have those words this morning as I contemplated this, but I think you beautifully put that. And so, if you don't mind, rewind a little bit even further,
Sure.
because a lot of our listeners are vets, and your book, you start out with a pretty, it's a pretty funny story on just the naivete and the process that a lot of us go through when we go into the military, and it cracked me up, but particularly your story on how you achieved 45 out of 50, quote
Yes.
unquote,
Yes.
to get your expert marksmanship. But so if you don't mind, just give us a little bit of background as well into your previous life.
Yeah, happy to do that. So my journey began after high school. I had hopes and dreams and aspirations of going to Hollywood to become the next Steven Spielberg. And so I had a strong interest in filmmaking at the time. And I went to the University of North Texas in Denton near Dallas and planned on being there for 4 years. But after about a year and a half, UNT said, "Hey, Josh, thanks for playing, but your grades are terrible. You need to leave." And so I clearly had a lot of growing up to do. This was around the time that 9/11 happened, and it got me thinking about joining the military. And I found out that filmmaking was a career I could do in the Air Force. And so I went to my nearest Air Force recruiter's office and I introduced myself and talked about filmmaking. He said that videography was the career field in the Air Force. And so
As
um,
any good recruiter would do.
exactly. As any good recruiter, telling the truth, hence the sarcasm. And so he said, "Hey, just so you know, videography is not available right now, but when you get into basic training, it will be. All you got to do is sign the dotted line." And again, I'm
That's
young
right.
and, UNT kicked me out for a reason. So I said, "Okay, let's do it. Sign me up." And so I joined without a guaranteed job. And sure enough, my recruiter lied to me and that was not available when I got to basic training. But to reference your story, David, what you're referring to is, every airman fires the M16 in basic training, and I think now it's the M4, but at the time it was the M16. And prior to joining the military, I had never shot a weapon in my life. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. And the range instructor took notice. And in order to become an expert marksman in the M16, you had to hit the target or specific parts of the target at least 45 times out of 50 rounds. And to say I was a bad shot was an understatement. I mean, I was bad. I was not a good shot at all. The range instructor got very frustrated with me. He threw an extra 30-round magazine in my rifle. So I did wind up getting a 45, but it was out of 80 rounds. And the only people who knew that I shot 80 rounds were me and the range instructor, because even on my score sheet, it said a 45 out of 50. And so I jokingly say that I'm still technically the worst expert marksman in the history of the Air Force. But that's an important part of my story because it was very evident that God had other plans for what I was wanting to do and achieve. And I think we've all heard the phrase that if we want to make God laugh, just tell him what your plans are. He got a good chuckle out of what I wanted to do and course corrected me accordingly. And so eventually, I got into security forces, which is military police. Which, if you know me, that's not really, you wouldn't expect that to be my career in the Air Force. I say career, I did a 4-year enlistment, but that's not really my personality. But that being said, I have a high respect for anyone in law enforcement and security, and gained a lot of incredible friends who I still consider family to this day. The camaraderie, as you guys know, and a lot of you listeners know, the camaraderie that you have in the military is really hard to achieve and exceed in the civilian world. And so met a lot of amazing peers and mentors through my time there. And really couldn't be happier with how things eventually worked out. But it was definitely a funny beginning to the journey.
That's awesome, man. I call that up. I call that that's good leadership right there, right? It's good
I,
leadership
I
just
think
to
so. I don't know.
set you up for success, man.
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, I'm curious. So your book is all about leadership. You talk a lot about in your coaching, helping leaders grow. Um, you know, from a basic definition, like what would you say makes a really good leader?
So great question, Stuart. I mean, there's a handful of individuals who have influenced me in my life in great ways. A lot of which don't even know me. And for me, I think the world-renowned leadership guru. When I think of that person, I think of John Maxwell. and his definition of is leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I like that definition because it's so simple, but it's so true. I think being able to tie into that, if we are influencing and developing people, then that truly is the definition of leadership. There's a question that I ask all of my clients to ask themselves, and that is, does my team feel the weight of my title or the energy of my leadership? And I think if people are feeling the energy of your leadership, you're influencing them in a great way. Now, to be clear, the energy of your leadership could be felt in a negative way as well. And so we have to remember that we're contagious. We can either infect or we can affect. So are we affecting people in a positive way through the influence and energy of our leadership?
That's good, man. I watched your book trailer, and it was really good, man. I really enjoyed it. There's something you said in there that really stuck with me, and I think it kind of ties here. And I'm just going to read it because I wrote it down. I said, you said, our calling to influence directly stems from how we view the world. I think it's a really powerful statement,
Mm-hmm.
because our view of the world can be very skewed
Mm-hmm.
depending on how we grew up, our own, life, how our parents taught us, what we encountered in life, and I think that's interesting, as we become a leader and have an impact on other people. It's all based on just how we were influenced, right? And then at some point, to be a really good leader, we need to kind of change that, right? We need to change how we view the world, through other experiences, surrounding ourselves with other people, seeing things differently, getting a different viewpoint, having people open up our blind spots, right? And so I'm curious, like, from your experience of teaching people, leading people, what have you found has helped you grow your view of the world past, well, like, how you grew up?
You can't be a great leader if you're not a great follower.
Mm.
And something I have learned over the years is I have to remain coachable. I have to think like a rookie. I have to recognize, to your point, Stuart, I have blind spots. And and I'll regularly say, like, hey, if you think you don't have a blind spot, that's a blind spot. We all have blind spots. We all have opportunities. We all have these experiences and these things that have occurred in our life, in our upbringing, that has allowed us to have a specific perspective on anything, a view on the world, a view on people, and good, bad, or indifferent. And the beauty in all of this is, while there are some perspective shifts that we need to take, we also want to hold on to the fact that nobody else shares your perspective. We are each one of one. So our perspective is not shared by anyone in the entire world, which makes us influential. We have the ability to influence those around us. And if we can influence those around us, we can affect change. And I believe that anyone who is a change agent is a leader. So if we're connecting the dots, what we're going to realize is that every one of us, any one of us who are listening to this, is a leader. For a lot of folks, myself included, for years, I didn't view myself as a leader. I didn't believe I was a leader. I put labels on myself when I was younger, and I couldn't grasp the concept that I was someone who other people would want to follow or be influenced by. And so I learned through the years on how to be a good follower. And eventually, when my own perspective began to shift, I then began to start implementing some leadership skills and practices that allowed me to lead and also continue to be led. But with perspective, the way that we view things drives the way that we do things. And for a lot of us and a lot of my clients, what we work through is a small shift in perspective. Anytime you work with a coach or a mentor, there are some folks who might believe, man, my life is a mess. I've got so much work I need to do. I need to make a massive 180-degree change in order to really affect change. But the reality is you are this close. And I mean, we're so close to experiencing breakthroughs, but we don't realize it until we have someone who can speak truth into us, speak life into us, and help us with a small shift in perspective to ultimately help us start doing things differently.
Yeah, one of the things, and this was a very practical outpouring of my preparation for this podcast with you, and just looking at some of your things, looking at your, reading your book, looking at some of the videos that you put on your website, which we didn't mention it, but it is thebeardedleader.com is the website. And I'll tell you, this hit me, as I was preparing to talk to you, and I was looking at your coaching program, and I also have a coaching program. We've talked to, we did a podcast recording yesterday with somebody who does a coaching program, and there's all these coaches, and it was really interesting. I'm like, man, everybody, this is such a saturated place is coaching. Like everybody is a coach now. And I had that thought. And then I had, because of the preparation for this, the immediate thought after that was a perspective shift. And I said, yeah, but who ever gets enough coaching? Like I'm a huge believer in coaching. And so every time you get coached, that person, especially if like you, they are dedicated to pouring themselves into the lessons of, for you specifically leadership. For me, it's, I'm very focused on, mindset and helping people to, again, a slight perspective change, expressing gratitude, like different exercises that I'm very passionate about taking guys through. And it just hit me in that moment. I'm like, this is not a saturated field. This is a field full of, and the word that came into my mind immediately, and I really try to integrate this word because it's a God word, is abundance. And
Yes.
just
Yeah.
preparing for this podcast, so I want to thank you, but it really forced me immediately when I had that thought, that negative scarcity thought of coaching being this saturated thing, that it just hit me so clearly that I'm like, nah, man, we serve a God of abundance. We live in a world of abundance. What can I not learn from somebody?
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. And I can learn from anybody, especially those folks that have dedicated their time and their effort into being a resource in that field. And so I just want to thank you. And if you don't mind speaking on that too, because it literally was a negative scarcity thought that immediately was countered by an abundant thought. And it gave me hope for myself too, right? It gave me hope for like, no, man, I have something. If anybody hires me to be their coach, they're going to be blessed by that. They're going to
Yes.
get something out of it. And if they don't, that's their fault. And if I see it that I can't grow, that's my fault. 100% that's my fault
That's
because it's
right.
not the truth.
I love that, David. I think you're right. There are a lot of coaches out there. For me, most of the people that I know in my life don't have a coach. Even though there's a lot of coaches out there, most of my friends, family,
100%.
don't have a coach. And I think it's important to recognize, just to your point, we can learn from anybody and everybody, especially because we now recognize each person has their own unique individual perspective that is not shared with anyone else. We can still learn from someone. But going back to, I know in a lot of work that you do, David, as you mentioned, is mindset stuff. And the thought that you initially had was a negative one. But what we know is that humans have up to 60,000 thoughts per day. And studies will show that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. And so it's no wonder why we regularly experience stress and worry and doubt, concern and anxiety and fear. But we know that fear is simply false evidence appearing real, and we're always going to find evidence in the things that we believe. And a lot of the work that I do begins with mindset. I think any kind of coach, you got to work on mindset first before you get into the bulk of the actual niche. And so we know that the thoughts that we have will dictate the feelings that we have, and the feelings that we have will dictate our actions, and our actions will ultimately dictate our legacy. So if we want to change our legacy, it begins with our thoughts. The problem is, for a lot of us, we make the mistake of assuming that all of our thoughts are true. And so the good news is, David, you have a thought and you immediately start challenging that thought because you recognize how important it is to challenge those negative thoughts and turn it into a different perspective. But there's so many people who don't know how to do that. There's so many people who struggle with managing their thoughts. And ultimately, this is why I regularly say everybody needs a coach. And I mean, and I'll tell you, I have my own counselor who I see once a month. I have my own coach. Even as a coach, I have my own coach who I see twice a month. And I'm married to a licensed professional counselor. So I get free counseling even when I don't want it, which is probably too often. But
Especially when you don't want it, right?
Especially when you
yes,
don't want
yes.
it.
Especially when you don't want it. Yeah. One thing I just want to, I want to repeat it because I actually sat on that line in the book because I didn't know that. I really had to process the 60,000 thoughts in a
Mhm.
day, 80% negative, 90% repeated. And so as I kept reading that, I'm like, dude, so the 80% that are negative, those are the 90% the repeated are just those. It's just a reinforced negative
Correct.
circle of just of negativity, right? And so when you wrote that, I'd never seen that stat before, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is fascinating to me on how much time, effort, capacity is taken by the negativity. But then to your other point, you can short circuit that, and you can inject things, and like for me, I love Bible verses, right? Like you can inject Bible verses into that. Like, nah,
Yes,
that's a lie. That's a lie from
that's
hell,
right.
right? Because this is what Jesus said. And there's ways to, and really, I think one of the best things, and you just said that as well, is one of the best things you can do is just stop and be like, huh, let me challenge that.
Exactly.
Even that process can get you out of a cycle. Just not that you have to have an answer and not that you have to be able to counter every single one of them. Oftentimes it's just a stop and a like, is that true?
It's
And then that thought is gone, right? It's just that it just goes away, like it because you have another 60,000 that you have to get to.
Yes, yeah, you're right. There's a long way to go and a long way to grow. But I love what you do, David. Even with your own clients, you talked about exercising gratitude, and a lot of folks don't practice gratitude or don't know what a gratitude practice looks like. And just a gratitude practice, Bible verses, journaling. There's so many things that we can do to even without a coach or without a counselor or a mentor. These are practices we can do individually that will allow us to start challenging those negative thoughts.
Josh, why? So you said that most people don't have a coach. And we have these statistics of all these negative thoughts. And we know that changing our mindset will help that. We know that coaches are good for us. We grow up with coaches. We have baseball coaches, soccer coaches, teachers, and then we become an adult and then we decide we just don't need a coach anymore. We know that eating healthy and exercising and lifting weights and reading books, like all these things are good for us, but a lot of times we just don't do any of it. Why? Why do people not hire coaches? Why do people know this stuff is good for them, but they don't do it?
Great question. So I like that you alluded to the physical aspects of things. Like we all know that cake and cookies and ice cream is bad for us. We know that sugar is not good for us, but that doesn't mean that we're gonna quit eating sugar all like
I'm gonna crush some brownies, dude. I'm gonna crush some
hey,
brownies.
I'm telling you, man, Bluebell down here in
Oh,
Texas,
Bluebell ice cream.
they're
Whew.
they're always releasing something good. And I got to tell you, it's moderation. It's moderation. But back to the question though. When I first so I first hired a counselor before I had a coach, and I hired a counselor, and I was in a place where I really was struggling. Like this was years ago, and I did not know how to manage my thoughts the way that I currently do, which thanks to a counselor I now can. But I didn't know how to manage the thoughts that I was having. I didn't understand how to navigate life without these 80% negative thoughts and 90% repetitive thoughts. And what was happening was, as I shared earlier, the thoughts that we have dictate our feelings dictate actions, actions dictate our legacy. That word legacy can be interchangeable with results as well. The actions that we take dictate our results. The results that I was achieving at the time were not conducive to the one I wanted to ultimately leave a legacy on. And so I knew that I needed help. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to begin. And so my initial thought was, I can't afford a counselor because I wasn't making that a part of my budget. I can't afford a counselor, but I knew that I couldn't afford to keep on living life the way that I was. So I invested in a counselor and very quickly realized I can't not afford a counselor. I can't not afford to have someone share with me and educate me and identify blind spots for me and help me consider perspective shifts and even a shifting my paradigm on things. I could not afford that anymore. And shortly thereafter, I hired my own coach to help me in the process. But the problem is, we get comfortable when we start learning and growing and developing, and so we stop. Because once a coach helps us achieve X, Y, or Z, we say, okay, I'm done. But if you notice in chapter Oh, what chapter is it? It's affecting change in my book, and I think it's chapter 3, where we talk about habits. And for a lot of us, we think that habits are a number that we're going to, it takes 66 days to form a habit. That's what the internet tells us these days. It takes 66 days to form a habit. So if we have this in mind, where, okay, you know what? On day 66, I'm done. I formed that habit. I no longer need to work on that. But what we know is that habits are not a finish line to be crossed. They're a lifestyle to be lived. And so the same thing can be with coaching. I'm convinced that I'm never not going to have a coach. I'm always going to be working with somebody because I owe it to myself. I owe it to my family. I owe it to my community to give them the best version of myself that I can. But my long-winded answer to your question, Stuart, I believe is because we get to a place where they helped us out of this mental state, or they helped us with X, Y, or Z, and now I'm good. But coaching is very much like, you think about practice. You think about practice in a game. And I don't know, I don't think that I put this in the book, but I'm actually going to ask you guys, do you know the average amount of minutes the average football player plays in a game?
Yeah, average minutes an average football player. 25.
So you would think it's a higher number, and I did too. It's actually more like 6 minutes, about 6 minutes per game.
6 minutes.
So you think about, on a 53-man roster, you got a lot of players, long snappers, punters, kickers. I mean, there's special teams players. There's a handful of players who don't get a lot of playing time. Of course, your quarterback's going to be playing, 30 minutes a game on average, I would assume. But the average football player across the board only plays about 6 minutes per game. How much practice is going into that 6 minutes per game? It's hours and hours and hours, and then you got game time. And I think a lot can be, you can kind of tie that into the coaching aspect, where we can't just go to practice and say, okay, I learned, now I'm done. Now I'm ready for the game. For the rest of my life, I'm in the game. We got to keep on practicing. We got to keep on investing in ourselves and getting poured into, and really just developing ourselves on a regular basis, so that we're always game ready. We don't need to get ready if we stay ready.
I love that, man. And it makes me think of well, first off, I want to acknowledge you've told Stu now twice. Uh, Excellent question. That
That's right.
is very atypical. Like most people think his questions are really dumb. So I want to just
It's because I'm
acknowledge
from
that. Stu,
Texas.
you're doing great. Well, no, I think you're practicing. And really it made me think about podcasting. And when you talk about practice and anything you do, like I've not gone back, but I want to go back and listen to like our first few podcasts because I guarantee you they're garbage. And I'm not saying that we're amazing now, but the level of comfort, the level of flow that we have now is like we could jump on any podcast at any time and just go, right? Because
Yeah.
but you're continuously doing it, and twice a week we're continuing to do it and continue to do it. And 5 years from now, who knows? Maybe we're like singing through a podcast and it's amazing. We're doing different things and being groundbreaking in different areas. But I love that you highlight that, and I think I think it's critical that folks overcome. I think leadership is very similar. Folks overcome the idea in order to be your best, you have to overcome the idea and the resistance and the speed bumps of like, man, I just don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm never going to be as good as Kobe, right? Well,
Yes.
yeah, dude, but dude shot, like I'm telling my kids now, I'm like, hey, you guys want to be good at basketball? Like that dude shot hours and hours and hours a day, every single day. That's what he did. And that's
Well,
why you see results. And so, like, leadership I see is no different. Like, you got to get in the books. You've got to get a coach. You've got to get different perspectives introduced to you in order to get to a level that you truly want to be at. And so, my question to you, and you mentioned price. I think price is such a fascinating thing with coaching because, Stu, I'd be curious, all the health benefits you've enjoyed after hiring Alex. Shout out to Alex, who will be on a webinar that we're doing here actually tomorrow, but when this comes out, it'll be days ago. But I'm sure there's a replay that's going to be available if you want it. But my point is, you invested in that. Do you see do you see that investment as being a positive or a negative, even though there was no cash ROI to it, and where you are in your health journey today, right?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I feel 1,000% better than I did before. Uh, and I mean, I want to tell everybody that they need to go get on a health journey and invest in themselves, because there's so many tertiary impacts to that, right? The way I show up every single day, the way I treat my kids, the way I treat my wife, the way I go to work, the energy that I
Eh,
have.
Not the way you treat your business partner. I'll say that, but go ahead.
That's
That's different.
that's different. But
So,
yeah,
so
dude. 1000%.
It's the investment. We have to look at these things differently. And so, Josh, my question is, you mentioned that that oftentimes we're very close to where we want to be. It's a slight tweak, right? You also are big on talking on your website and about misperceptions. If you don't mind talking through a couple of those, because I think it would really resonate to name some of those misperceptions to help people to be able to bend them and be like, oh yeah, that totally resonates, and I'm not as far as I think I am. Like that's a misperception. A lie I'm telling myself
Yeah.
with a slight shift of perspective. And I think a powerful way to get at that is naming those things.
I think that one of the things that you just touched on, David, is the fact that if you go back to one of the first podcast episodes that you guys did, and you're like, hey, it probably wasn't great, but we found this rhythm, we found this flow. But that can be said about anything. As our boy Zig Ziglar would say, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And I think for a lot of us, we don't start because we don't feel ready, we don't feel prepared. And the two words that I ask all of my clients to really focus on is take action. Take action. We don't have to be great to start, but take action. What happens is motivation and confidence actually tends to follow the action. But so many of us are trying to get motivated and trying to get ready and feel a certain kind of way before we actually get out and do something. But if we just do something, it doesn't have to be good. We can keep on doing it to be great. And eventually you're going to get more confidence and more motivation along the way to help you keep on going. But going back to the misconceptions, and you might be referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I do talk about particular labels that we encounter.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So, what I share is how our labels create limitations, but we want to turn those limitations into lessons. And for me, the label, as I shared with you, I was only at UNT, University of North Texas, for a year and a half because my grades were not good. I mean, they said, "Hey, you gotta get out of here." And the story that I share with a lot of folks is how when I was younger, I was in high school and I had plans to go to college after high school. My parents supported my idea of going to college, and so I remember my dad pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, I'm excited that you want to go to college. I think that's great. I think that's a great path to have, but you've got to take school seriously. You've got to make grades a priority for you." And so I heard my parents, and eventually I walked across the stage at my high school graduation, and I graduated 28th in my high school class out of 30 people. And so 30 people, I'm thinking, man, I barely graduated. I mean, 28 out of 30, that's the 30 is the part that I sometimes have to leave out, but no, I'm just kidding. But, when I graduated 28th out of 30, I put a label on myself. I told myself I was not smart enough, and I believed it. I told myself I wasn't smart enough. I had zero confidence. I didn't believe that I could achieve a lot of things that ultimately I was able to achieve. But what happened is I was putting a label on myself of not being smart enough, which subsequently came with limitations. I was putting myself in this box that I did not know how to break free from. And there's a poet who has a line that I love, and he says, and his name is NQ, and he says, "Defining myself is like confining myself. So I undefined myself to find myself." And the reason I love this quote, if we're breaking it down, defining myself, or in other words, putting a label on myself, is like confining myself, putting that limitation. So I undefined myself to find myself. And that didn't occur for me until I started meeting people in the military, great mentors of mine, who, again, they eventually became friends and family members for me. But they helped me recognize the two things I can control in my life each and every day is my attitude and my effort. And I can always show up with a positive attitude, even on those tough days, which there's gonna be a lot of tough days. We know that not every day is going to be a good day, but we can find the good in every day. And I can still choose positivity on those tough days, and I can always provide maximum effort. And when I was able to start surrounding myself with people who are speaking truth into me and helping me realize how important attitude and effort and showing up and perspective and all these things were, those limitations began to crumble. And I was able to break free from those chains and turn those into lessons. And so I think if we're going back to the original question, I know you talked about misperceptions. For me, a misperception was that I wasn't a leader. A misperception was I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't capable, I wasn't qualified, I wasn't credible, I wasn't fill in the blank. A lot of listeners can say, I wasn't this or I'm not this. And my encouragement to you is to break free from those limitations, turn those into lessons by challenging the thoughts that you're having. Just consider something different because you can say, well, no, I have evidence in what I believe. And we're always going to find evidence in the things that we believe. If I believe I'm not smart, I will find evidence that backs that up. I will find evidence that supports the thought that I'm having. But remember, the thoughts that we have are not always true. They're not always accurate. And so we have to force ourselves to challenge what we're thinking and consider a different perspective. Because to your point, David, man, just a small 3 or 4 degree shift can change our lives.
I joke with my wife about this a lot. My wife, will have some idea. She'll see something somewhere and she'll get this idea of like, whatever it is, it could be bad for you, good for you. And she's got these thoughts in her head. And I was joking with her. I was like, hey, why don't you Google if spinach is bad for you? Right. And she went and Googled it. And lo and behold, there's some article about eating too much spinach is bad for you. Right. And like spinach is a power food. Like more often than not, it's going to be good for you. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you're right, man. Like the more you search for that answer, the idea in your head, this limiting belief, this identity, it's going to be true regardless of if it really is true or not, right? Just
Well,
depending on
bias confirmation, right?
it's bias
It
confirmation. That's
is.
right.
And the internet is a dangerous place because you
Oh,
can
dude.
find anything that's going to support the thought that you're having. I'm still waiting to find a website that says that Sour Patch Kids is going to get me ripped because the
Yeah.
moment I find it, I'm going to crush some Sour Patch Kids.
Uh,
Well, and
there's
and, and that's
good.
that's a big reason why we're so divided today because we take all of our opinions and we get them fed to us. A lot of us just we don't challenge anything that comes in, right? There's some fascinating studies and some fascinating podcasts on rabbit holes and how people are so easily manipulated and really if you think about it, it's a form of leadership to guide people down a path, but it's nefarious, right? It's they understand the human psyche, and to get you to do the things they want you to do is also a bastardization and a corruption of leadership. There's a
Mm,
skill to it. There's a
that's
skill
good.
to it,
Yeah.
and that's the power of and sorry to cut you off, Stu, but that's the power that I think leadership we need to recognize. You said it earlier, our influence and our impact. We all have influence and we all have impact. And we have to realize the extent of that. That's one of my favorite things to talk to dudes about. Like in general, I'll just call a guy and be like, hey, dude, I hope you know that you're a person of influence and I respect you
Mm,
because when you say something, I'm telling you, I'm not saying this as a ethereal conceptual thing. Like I respect the words that come out of your mouth and they have an influence on me. So you should take heed of that power, right? We all have it and we need to recognize it because as you recognize it and you humble yourself with it, then you can truly be effective and pour into people and be that true that servant leader.
David, I want to highlight and acknowledge you for what you just shared because I think too many of us have these thoughts about other people who are influential in their own life, and we see them making an impact and making a difference, but we don't verbalize that. And man, it's powerful when you contact someone and say, "Hey, Stuart, I just want to make sure that you know the questions that you asked in this podcast, they really are excellent. Hey, David, the things that you're sharing, like they're true, like they're amazing, and you're impacting me in a positive way." That those kind of verbal appreciations go a long way. And so I want to acknowledge you for that because I don't want to glaze over that's very important that a lot of people fail to miss in their leadership journey.
Yeah, no, and I also, if you're anything like me, my personality, especially if you do it to another dude in person, eye to eye, and you see them kind of squirm in the discomfort of being acknowledged, I love that part too. Like that's one
Yeah,
of my
yeah.
favorite parts.
So
David
good.
David likes to give 20-second hugs and just like get in there and just get really uncomfortable.
I love to give 20-second hugs.
But hey, David, I like to receive them. So next time we see them, I'll be on the lookout.
Uh, Josh, something else that you're talking about, and it kind of hit a nerve with me is I think is especially true in the military. of guys and gals that are leaving the military and this identity that they have, and it kind of goes into this same idea of the box that we live in, right? And these
Mhm.
limiting beliefs that we have. It's this identity that we have. We're a military man or woman. We're not a good rifle shooter, right? We're uh, not a good dad or husband or you know, you name it, right? And as we transition out, I think a lot of military veterans have a hard time changing their identity because they get stuck in it and they don't have a further purpose or a mission. And then they don't show up for themselves the right way and they don't show up for the people that they're eventually leading the right way.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it as well with your clients and your coaching. How do you get people to change that? How do you get people to realize and change their identity?
I'll paint a picture for you. So we're starting with a small scope and a blurry lens.
Yeah.
And through coaching and through questions and through mentorship and through perspective and through affecting change and consistency and intentionality, all of a sudden we look up and months go by and you'll notice that the scope is larger and the lens now is significantly clearer because we now can identify our world that we were living in was just a small circle here at this point. And now there's so much more because we have a different perspective on things. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about purpose. It's easy to identify what your individual purpose is within your branch of the military or whatever you're doing within the military. You have clarity and direction through the structure that the military provides. But the moment you get out, that structure that we all crave, but we don't know that we crave, is no longer there. And there's a lack of clarity and direction. We also no longer have our purpose because our purpose was tied to the identity that we had in the military. So what I encourage any client to do is discover what you're passionate about. Like what is something that, and I'll just start like, hey, what makes you smile? Like that's a question I'll just begin with. What makes you smile? What makes you happy? Like what lights your fire? What gets you hyped up, right? And so when you start finding something that you were excited about, something that you're passionate about, you'll typically find your purpose through that passion. But I ask people like what is truly something that gets you up in the morning and gets you fired up. And when you can identify what or who your purpose is, that's going to trump the motivation each and every day because we know that motivation is very much like a flame and flames come and go. And I'll ask folks like, hey, where's your flame going to be a week from now? Where's your flame going to be a month from now, 6 months from now? If you don't have your purpose identified, it's hard to stay motivated each and every day. But discipline is going to trump motivation. Purpose is going to trump motivation. But helping people find what they're passionate about and ultimately discovering their purpose through their passion, I think is the route to take.
That's so good, man. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, dude, I wish we had like another 2 hours. This is so good, and I think one of the things you just said about the circle. Um, what I found fascinating in the military, it took me a long time to get to this point, but now, and I've projected this now to coaching and different things, to receiving coaching and different things of personal growth and self development, and it's the idea that your aperture is so tight, and that also we it's not good for us to forget that we also, with our aperture and our lens, when we're looking at others, we don't typically have, especially those who are further than we are, we don't typically have the full view from their perspective. So like
Yes.
I find it funny when people are like, my whatever, my admiral, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like he doesn't know anything. Our leaders are so dumb. The president's such an idiot. Like I can't stand that guy. But you've never been in the position to deal with near the things that are coming at that individual. And so because our aperture is just not even is not big enough. And
Yeah.
when it comes to, business and different people doing different things, a humble view is always a better view to start, right? Like, okay, maybe the admiral, maybe he earned his stars because he's not a complete idiot.
Yeah.
And I've just never sat in his seat. I have no idea the stuff that comes across. And so I think humility also, but what's special about that's caused me to be way less judgmental. It's caused me to never lead with, oh, that guy's he's an idiot. No, no, he's not. That's typically not the answer, but it also helps me to come at it like, I wonder what I would love to expand my aperture. And how do I get better? And what coach is going to take me to a place where that lens is opened up a bit more, that I can now more fully take in information and make actual good judgments for myself and my life and moving forward. And also, dude, I'm a huge believer. The more you open that aperture, the more rich your life is. Like, this is not a fun place to live, right? Like
No,
this
it's
tight
not.
little, like you just, this is your view. It's so myopic. Dude, this is a beautiful place to be with a
It
bigger aperture.
it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback for anybody, in any walk of life. But man, we're all going through something. We all have something that we're having to deal with and manage and lead, not just the people on our team, but maybe our family, maybe our neighborhood, our community. And I always encourage to find the wins, to find the successes, and look at someone and what are they doing well? What are they doing better than you? Because there is everyone around me is doing something better than I am in some aspect of my life. So what
Yeah,
can I learn from them in the process?
I love it.
It's good, man. It's like my 6-year-old telling me how to drive from the back seat. Boy,
Boy,
Well, we've been watching March Madness, and like sometimes my kids will their immediate. I never used to catch this, I never used to challenge it, but they'll be like, "Oh, that guy sucks." I'm like, "Does he suck?" Like he
collegiate
missed that
basketball.
3-point shot, right? But he's playing at the highest level of college. Like that
yeah,
dude, like he's done a lot to get where he is. And these women, last night we were watching the women's game in the Iowa, and Caitlin Clark is just
yeah,
baller, dude,
yeah,
baller. Like
yeah,
these crazy shots, right? And it's easy to dismiss and be like, oh, genetics, oh, whatever, and to dismiss the 10,000 hours of the thousands and thousands of shots. And so I try to draw my kids' attention to that too, and be like, hey guys, like that person doesn't suck. Like your dream is to be where they're at. So like,
yeah,
do they suck? I don't think so. I don't think so. Like let's have a different perspective before we jump in on this. And maybe with that different perspective, what's beautiful about that, and this is my little form of leadership in my household, but with that different perspective, maybe it drives them to take the actions to be like, oh, well, how did they get there? How'd they even have that opportunity? Hey, dude, like get outside. There's a basketball hoop. Like get going, right? You want to play
absolutely.
quarterback? Let's get out. We have to do 100 minimum passes a day. Like you want to do this? Let's do this.
Yeah, it's
But
so
you got to
good.
do. But you got to do it. But you got to do it, right?
That's right. I love it. So good.
Josh, this has been a fantastic conversation, man. Like David said, we could probably go for another couple hours. I love your book. Thanks for sending me a copy of it. I did share it with David afterwards, so he's read it.
Yeah.
And
But you
man, your
signed it. You
podcast is
signed the
great.
front of it, and you're like, keep leading well. And it's like to stew, and I don't know, man.
Yeah,
Just
and man, the emphasis that you put on me, like felt like a shot fired over to David. David, I promise a copy of Leading a Legacy is going to find its way to your mailbox.
nice, nice.
Don't get his hopes up, man. Josh, where do we send people to get your book, learn more about you, listen to your podcast? What do we put in the show notes?
Thank you, Stuart. Man, yeah, if you would head on over to the website that David referenced earlier, thebeardedleader.com. You can find my book, Leading a Legacy, How to Live Today to Make an Impact for Tomorrow. You can find this on Amazon. So Leading a Legacy is the name of the book. But yeah, you can find I'm on a number of different social media platforms. If you go to my website, that's probably the easiest way to go straight to each one. I'm the Bearded Leader on Instagram, on YouTube. Find me on Facebook. I do have a Facebook community. It's a Limitless Leadership Facebook community that we're growing daily. I mean, we just exceeded a little over 500 members in about 2 months, and so
Nice.
people are finding value in it, and it's a place for like-minded individuals to grow and develop their leadership skills. And we're all learning from each other, and that's the beauty of it. So, yeah, find me at thebeardedleader.com, and I'd love to hear from you. So reach out to me and let's connect.
Awesome, man.
Love it. Hey,
Yeah,
Josh, I
dude.
just want to acknowledge you as well. Like, I appreciate the fact that you are doing the work to live in your God-given gifts and abilities, and what I love most about that is that it's blessing others, right? It's helping others to become more than they currently are, and getting towards that potential and who that God created them to be. And you're a conduit, you're a catalyst for that. And I just really appreciate it. I don't think you're going to recognize the full scope of that change, that impact, until we get to heaven, man. But I just appreciate you living in that gifting and making the decision to pursue this full time, despite the fear and how scary it is. I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that, and it's blessing. Excuse me, it's blessing others. So thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, guys and gals, reach out to Josh. Go buy his book. Check out his podcast. Go to his website, thebeardedleader.com. And let's all go take uncommon action. See you.
See you.
Hey, for those of you who've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that Dave and myself transitioned out of a 20-year career in the military, in the Navy. And there was some really big struggles in that. And I'd say that for anybody that's in a transition of changing an identity can have a really, really hard time finding a new identity and going through the struggles of figuring out what's next. We talk a lot about purpose. We talk a lot about tribe and community. We talk a lot about mission. And those aspects of a transition are really hard to figure out. So you need a community. You need a tribe. You need to have someone in your life that's going to hold you accountable and help you grow into this new identity. That's what we do in the Kinetic Man. We have a lot of military veterans in our space that we talk through on a daily and monthly basis of how to figure out what's next, how to figure out how to continue to live with purpose, live with mission, and be incredible husbands, incredible fathers, incredible leaders in the community, and incredible businessmen. We have a ton of entrepreneurs. We have guys doing deals together, investing with each other, and growing with each other to be the best men that they can possibly be, so they can show up every single day for their families and for their businesses. If that's something that sounds interesting, come join us. You can go to thekineticman.com/signup, thekineticman.com/signup, and come grow with us. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Kinetic Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
And on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.